to business. Now, you can be willing to buy goods and services all you want, but if there's no one to sell it, your demand's going to go unmet. That's where the other half of the equation comes into play. Supply is the willingness and ability to sell goods and services at a set price at a specific time. Now, as my apprentice donut makers, you need to figure out what price you're willing to sell the donuts for. It costs about 10 cents to make a donut. So how many will you be willing to sell for a nickel, a dime, a quarter, half a buck, etc.? In this way, we use a similar thought process to come up with not only a supply curve, as well as a supply table. Now, the law of supply is the higher the price, the more willing you are to sell, and the lower the price, the less willing you are to sell. Similarly, the supply curve can shift just like the demand curve shifts. Some of the things that affect supply are technology. It used to be that a pocket calculator was made by a company called Texas Instruments. They weighed about 1.5 pounds and cost roughly $100. With the improvements in technology today, you can get a calculator that can do more than the old TI built into a wristwatch or sewn into the lining of a notebook. Input costs. In making the TI, not only did technology improve to make the manufacturing process more efficient, the cost of the things to make the actual calculator fell. So it cost less money to make, so we can make more product for the same amount of money. And then we pass the savings along to the consumer. Finally, there's price expectations. I know that I'm going to be able to sell these at a higher price, so I'm going to put that price and supply those at that price point. If I sell at a unreasonably low price, people's first reaction is going to be, what's wrong with it that you're selling it so inexpensively? So now let's pause for distinctions. We already know there's a difference between price, cost, and value, but let's dig a little deeper. Cost is what you have to give up in order to produce goods and services. It's what does it take to make a thing. Price is what you have to give up in order to obtain goods and services. What would it take for you to buy it? And then value is what you determine the worth of the goods and services to be. What would you sell that for? Back in '91, the Hallmark company decided to start selling Star Trek ornaments. The first one they sold was the Starship Enterprise. You press a button on the saucer session, and the lights lit up, and Spock wished you happy holidays. It cost about $1.50 to make. At Hallmark, it was priced at $7.99, almost a 500% markup from the manufacturing price. These days, they're on the secondary market selling for almost $130. That's an 860% markup from the retail price. One of the things I'd like you to do is I'd like you to get used to drawing this shape. Price is on the top, quantity is on the bottom, demand slopes down, supply slopes up. When supply and demand meet, you reach equilibrium. This is where the willingness and ability to buy goods and services and the willingness and ability to sell goods and services meets. Meets in the middle, X marks the spot. Equilibrium does not, however, happen all the time because we are allocating scarce resources among competing and unlimited wants. Shortages. Oftentimes, the demand for something is higher than the supply of something. The PS5 at Christmas time 2020 there were a lot of people who wanted them, not a lot of people could get them. During the Rona outbreak, toilet paper, hand sanitizer, all of those things were in high demand, but the suppliers could not keep up with the demand. When the demand is higher than the quantity supplied at a specific price, you are going to get a shortage. During the Rona crisis, we also had other shortages because there were more wanted than were able to be supplied. On the other hand, when the demand for a thing is less than the available supply, you get a surplus. Back in 2008, there was no demand for a gas hog SUV when prices for gasoline were hovering around $4.50 a gallon. So You get what we have here. You get parking lots full of SUVs that were made, but that nobody's going to buy because nobody wants to spend $100 filling their SUV up. In Medford, there were dealerships that were reducing the prices of SUVs and big trucks by nearly half of their sticker price just to move them off of the lot. When you have more of a thing at a certain price than is demanded, you will get a surplus. So who decides? Well, it all depends on who you ask. In the 1700s, there was an economist named Adam Smith. Smith put forth the concept of the invisible hand that regulates the market. Smith said that the willingness to buy and the willingness to sell would be all it took to determine equilibrium prices of goods and services. There didn't need to be any intervention by any centralized organization in order for this to work. However, during the Great Depression, the invisible hand took a vacation. The global economy went into the dumpster and the United States suffered for it. Come the 1930s, an economist named John Maynard Keynes came up with the concept that government action needed to give the invisible hand direction. Now, we're going to get into Smith and Keynes later, but know that government often puts its finger in the economic pie, especially in the determination of price. When the government, and it's always the government, sets the price above equilibrium, they have established a price floor. This is the price below which goods and services cannot be bought, even though the invisible hand would set the price at lower than the price floor. Farmers are protected in this way by governments setting minimum prices for purchases of farm goods. This guarantees the farmer a predetermined income from the sale of those goods regardless of supply and demand. Price floors lead to surplus goods. On the other hand, when government decides that the price of something should be below the equilibrium of price, you get a shortage. Think of rent-controlled apartments. If you have a rent-controlled apartment, the market price of that apartment would rise a lot higher than what the rent control price would allow. So, when you have a price floor, you have a surplus. When you have a price ceiling, you have a shortage. Easiest way to remember this is to flip the house. The ceiling is on the bottom, the floor is on the top.